If you had a really amazing ability, there was a trendy expression a few years back that we used to describe it. We'd say, that's your superpower. And all we meant is that it was something you were really good at. But when Ronald Braunstein was 16, he believed he had an actual superpower: flying. At the time, he was studying at a top boarding school for the arts. He'd already realized that he had an incredible talent in music, and he wanted to become a conductor.
From that first moment that I was conducting, I felt very, very natural and very, everything just felt right.
His superpower didn't have anything to do with that, but in a way, it had everything to do with it. He discovered it one day after class. He was alone at the top of a hill covered in tall grass. It was one of his favorite places. In high school, Ronald had run track. He was fast. And running didn't just give him a rush. It was euphoric. So he took off down the hill.
As I was running down, I turned my head at a certain angle when there was kind of a sound. It sounded like a flute. I felt airborne, and I felt that I had lifted myself off the ground. And I realized that I had taught myself how to fly.
No wings, no engine, but aloft. Flying. What springs to mind here is the ancient Greek myth about another guy who learned to fly. His name was Icarus, and he famously learned that flying produced dizzying highs and devastating crashes. In time, Ronald would get those unmerciful lessons. But at this moment on that hill outside his school, he was absolutely 100% exhilarated.
I just felt the sense of elation and lightness I've never felt before. It just felt like anything was possible.
Anything was possible. What could feel better than that? So Ronald kept going back to that hill, and he kept flying, but he wasn't going to advertise it.
I knew that there was no one else who could understand, so I just kept it to myself, my own little secret.
Ronald would indeed fly to dizzying heights, but the secret around his superpower-like talent would nearly kill him. This is Brain Stories, a show about one of the most bewildering mysteries of the human experience, mental illness, told by the people who live with it and those who support them. I'm your host, Frank Kosa. By the time Ronald Braunstein was in the 3rd grade, he was already hurtling towards his destiny. The problem was, he had two. The first was music, and that destiny launched when a string quartet trooped into the assembly hall of Ronald's school and started to play.
The moment I heard those notes coming out, it was the most beautiful thing for me. It made me feel like I was connected to the universe. I knew at that point that I wanted to have a life in music.
The second was a lot harder to put a finger on. In fact, it would go unnamed for decades. But by the time Ronald heard that string quartet, he was already in its grip.
It was more than just melancholy. I felt a genuine sense of sadness, hopelessness, and aloneness.
Apart from his love of music and whatever that other thing was, Ronald's life was a lot like anyone else's. His mom was a teacher, his dad was a lawyer, who made a lot of money on a case involving Winnebagos. Ronald was the oldest of 3 boys who grew up in a Jewish home in a nice Pittsburgh suburb. He started on his destiny in music by learning the violin, and then guitar and composition. But he was 14 when his future in music became suddenly clear. That happened one evening when his father took him to the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. On the program was Beethoven's Ninth.
Beethoven was always my man. When I heard his Ninth Symphony, there was a certain point when I realized I wanted to conduct his symphonies.
That certain point was a crescendo that peaked at measure 595. The lyrics are in Beethoven's native German, but they translate like this: above the stars he must dwell. Beethoven was talking about God, But that section of music would launch Ronald on his quest to fly. Maybe not above the stars, but at least to his own stratosphere.
And at that point, I decided I wanted to be a conductor.
Okay, I'd like to explain it all in exquisite detail because Ronald's story is full of strange events and countless twists that are epically Byzantine. But it would take forever. So I'm going to jump to the part where it really begins to fly. But first, there are a few key events that are important to know for Ronald's story. 1. When he was 14, he did some strange things that got his dad worried, so his dad took him to a psychiatrist.
The psychiatrist told my dad that it wasn't serious, that I just had bad nerves.
2. His mom developed a serious mental illness. His parents began fighting. His dad broke his mom's nose. They got divorced, and she soon moved to New York to become a painter.
She started painting more and more and more, and very compulsively. I guess she was kind of getting revved up.
3. Ronald escaped to boarding school, proved to be a wizard of a composer, and got his very first chance to conduct. He thought he was in heaven.
As I approached the podium, it crossed my mind that maybe I'm some kind of imposter. Maybe I shouldn't really be doing this. But once I got on the podium, everything was right. I was a complete natural.
4. It was also here he believed he had taught himself to fly. Literally fly.
It just felt like anything was possible.
5. He got invited to Juilliard, probably the top music school in the country. And through immense talent, and also huge persistence, he convinced the dean to allow him to become an undergraduate conducting major, something that hadn't happened for decades and was basically almost impossible.
And I just kept going in, and I eventually just wore him down.
6. While at Juilliard, Ronald had enormous success as a conductor because of razor-sharp ears and knowing the musicians perhaps better than they knew themselves.
I realized that they were trying to make themselves invulnerable, to cover themselves up, how scared they were. And during that time, I started to let go of my fear. I thought I did better as a conductor when I was open and willing to be vulnerable.
7. But he also went on spending sprees. He bought stacks of designer clothes, a Rolex watch, and at one point he ordered not one, but 2 grand pianos.
And then I told them where they were going to deliver it. And they said, well, what kind of, is it a concert hall? I said, no, it's just my apartment. So they sent a man down there and looked at my apartment and they said, I don't think we're going to sell you these pianos.
Eventually, he was forced to declare bankruptcy. Finally, 8. He planned to go full bore into Juilliard's master's program and become the next Ronald Braunstein. That's when he ran into a brick wall. Right before he finished his senior year, his professor told him that he wasn't going to let Ronald in.
He just said, I need to go to a doctor, ... under his breath, a special kind of doctor. It showed the extreme shame associated with being mentally ill, that he couldn't even just say, you need to go to a psychiatrist.
Ronald freaked out and basically lost a year until a girlfriend suggested he try a conducting program at a small school with great European connections called the Mozarteum in Salzburg, Austria. On a wing and a prayer, he went. He excelled. And by the time he finished, he got hired to become the assistant conductor for the Amsterdam Orchestra. Okay, this is where his story takes off. Because it was now, about a week before he left for Amsterdam, that he overheard a conversation that completely changed his life.
I was just quietly sitting, having a cup of coffee, and barely within earshot, there were 3 conductors all boasting about how they're going to, go to Berlin and how great this competition is. And it really separates the men from the boys.
Ronald asked what it was. They told him the Herbert von Karajan Conducting Prize. Herbert von Karajan was possibly the biggest conductor of the 20th century, and certainly one of the most successful. He sold over 200 million records and spearheaded record deals for conductors and orchestras that brought unprecedented money into the world of classical music. Winning his competition was a golden ticket. It meant a lifetime of recording deals and bookings with the world's best orchestras. But the 3 older conductors explained that the competition required knowing dozens of major symphonic works, half of which Ronald had never conducted.
And they were saying, oh, I did this piece, and oh, well, I did that piece. And I'm thinking, wow, this is way over my head.
Ronald left with the idea that maybe he would give the competition a shot in a couple of years. And he stuck with that idea until in the middle of a dull chore, he was struck by an irrepressible thought.
Here I was, just minding my own business, doing my laundry in the local laundromat. And suddenly, in a flash, it became very crystal clear to me that if I went to that competition, that I would win it.
There was about zero evidence to support this belief. Nevertheless, Ronald had no doubts.
So I took these clothes out of the washing machine, put them into the big plastic garbage bag.
They were still soggy.
And I went directly to the train station and caught the last train to Berlin.
Ronald had no plan, no money, and no place to stay. The whole idea screamed, well, train wreck. Then, a complete stranger, a woman old enough to be his grandmother, sat down in the seat next to him. In his broken German, he struck up a conversation.
And she said, I heard the word Karja. Oh, really? Oh, Karja. What are you doing, Karja?
The woman's name was Frau Berghoff. They got to talking. And by the time they arrived in Berlin, she was insisting that Ronald stay in her apartment. But that was just the beginning of the incredible help she would provide.
She cooked every meal. She starched my shirts. She even showed me a way to the place where the competition was held.
It was only a few blocks from her apartment. But Ronald had a horrendous sense of direction.
She felt the need to take care of me.
In this meeting that happened purely by chance, Ronald solved every major logistical problem he faced around the competition. He could not have felt more competent. Never mind that no American had ever won. Once again, he had a familiar belief.
I felt anything was possible.
Now all he had to do was learn the music, starting with the half of the repertoire that he had never conducted. It cannot be overstated how huge a problem that actually was.
Normally, I'll need like a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years to learn a score.
It was a little like competing in the Olympic decathlon, but never ever having done 5 out of the 10 events. You'd expect to be laughed out. But Ronald decided that he could, and would, learn entire symphonies in a single night.
I barely ate, I barely slept. I spent a lot of time working until daybreak, learning these things because that's the time I had. I felt invincible.
Good thing, because competition was fierce. Ronald was up against nearly 100 conductors from all over the world. They were very accomplished and considerably more experienced, which necessarily wasn't saying a lot, because Ronald had never conducted a professional orchestra in his life.
I was 23, there wasn't anyone. Let's just say I was the youngest one by far.
The carry-in competition began. In the course of a week, there were 5 rounds, each ending with at least half of the conductors being sent home. Ronald survived the first round, then the second. It seemed almost like a mistake, except Ronald found that he connected with the professional musicians just as powerfully as he had with the student musicians at Juilliard. It was simply a superpower. A lot of musicians I spoke with who played for Ronald described this. They said the connection to Ronald was so intense that it was like Ronald was playing their instrument and they were just holding it for him. So, learning a symphony overnight and connecting with the musicians in the performances by day, Ronald somehow fought his way into the last round. It was down to him and 2 others. And the composer he was assigned to conduct in the final? His man, Beethoven. And not just any work. He was going to conduct Beethoven's 5th. It seemed like kismet. So at this point, Ronald phoned his mother in New York. Jerry, as he called her by then, scraped together the money for a plane ticket and arrived just in time to see the final round. When the performances were over, Carry-On began awarding prizes, starting with 3rd place. The last conductor standing was Ronald. He won, the first U.S. citizen ever. All these years later, the memory still overpowers him.
I knew I was going to win. Well, because the orchestra knew I was going to win.
Why does the thought of that bring tears to your eyes?
So I realized that I was going to win, not because I'm the one who deserved it or I was a genius or anything, But I just felt that they had already decided that I was going to win, that they were going to play for me.
But in the moment, on stage with the great Herbert von Karajan, the gold medal in his hand, Ronald was nearly exploding with both emotion and the conviction that he could do anything.
I was immediately just jubilant, I thought, I was actually able to fly again.
Ronald celebrated with his mother and Frau Berghoff at one of Berlin's finest restaurants. Then he flew to Paris, where he spent his entire prize winnings, the equivalent of $25,000 today, in a couple of weeks. Not to worry. He had won the Karajan competition. He was going to be set for life with bookings, recording contracts, and likely becoming the director of a top orchestra one day soon. And indeed, Ronald had already signed with the best personal manager in Europe.
This is the manager, of Herbert von Karajan, Seiji Ozawa, Riccardo Muti, me. And I had the most potential because I was younger.
And sure enough, a telegram soon arrived from the Stuttgart Radio Orchestra.
I was just speechless. I still have that telegram printed on that white paper, and it said, "We would like to invite you to conduct our orchestra."
Ronald got bookings as a guest conductor with top orchestras all over the world. Oslo, Amsterdam, Tokyo. So there were highs, lots of them. But sometimes that high became so razor sharp that it was too high. Like in 1983, when Ronald was conducting the North Holland Philharmonic. It involved his beloved Beethoven, and once again, Symphony No. 5. What's unusual about this symphony is that it starts not with music, but with a silence, an intentional blank.
It's like you're starting in the middle of a drama. It starts with an eighth note rest, which means you give upbeat and a downbeat and nothing happens.
Only after the rest does the first note come in. That creates a challenge for the musicians of timing and intensity, especially for the strings.
The one thing that string players are afraid of is to play first, to come in before everyone else. As soon as you give a beat to the strings, there's always a slight delay because they don't want to be first.
Ronald wanted to get the first note right, so that's where he started rehearsal. He didn't like it.
They were not playing the first note loud enough or together enough.
And if the orchestra wasn't getting the first note right, what was the point in playing the second? So he rehearsed the first note again, and again, and again.
At that point, my ears were like razor blades, and I knew it could be more together.
This went on for 45 minutes, and it might have gone on for another 45 minutes.
I don't think they ever really got it.
But Ronald was interrupted.
The manager came in and said to me, "Ronald, I think you're too sick to continue."
Ronald was totally confused. He thought the orchestra manager meant a cold or a flu. He explained that he didn't feel sick at all. Whether embarrassed, flustered, or simply ill-equipped to talk about mental illness, the manager didn't press.
He walked me up to my hotel room and sheepishly helped me pack my bag and gave me $1,000.
Ronald had been fired.
I fell into a deep depression after that. For a year, I couldn't get out of bed. I canceled many, many engagements.
For years, Ronald had these wild fluctuations in his career. He'd guest conduct for the best orchestras around the world. Then he would flame out and not be able to work or not get hired. He did so well during the upswings that his career had lots of brilliance. But when the highs went off the rails, or he was too low to even get out of bed, no one came to his aid and helped him to get help. Not even after he went drinking with a few musicians one night, and it nearly killed him.
We were just joking around, basically. It was a great concert, and I said, on that rooftop up there, if I went up there, I could fly.
Not surprisingly, the musicians were skeptical.
"Oh, yeah, come on. Yeah, really, watch me. I can go up there and I'll show you I can fly." I was ready to prove it to them. So I got up on top of a 6-story building on a tin roof, and they were looking at me really scared, like, "Whoa, what Is he serious? Someone talked me down, thank God.
Ronald still didn't see a need for help, and that might have continued indefinitely, if not for something that happened in 1985. He was 28 years old.
So one day, my phone rang and I picked it up. It was my mother, and she said, "Ronald, your brother has not been going to his psychiatrist's appointment. He's missed the last 2 weeks. Could you go to his apartment and take him to the psychiatrist?"
So Ronald went to his brother's apartment.
And he said, "I don't want to go. I'm feeling fine." He was actually quite agitated. I said, "Listen, I'll go with you. Everything will be fine. Let's just go." And he kind of begrudgingly came out with me, and we walking down the street. And then he said, "No, actually, I don't want to go. I'm not going to go." I ended up kind of dragging him by his ankles on the cement. And it was very, very, it was a bad scene.
They made it to the office, but by now Ronald was also agitated. The psychiatrist called in his brother, and about 30 minutes later came out and asked to speak with Ronald.
So I went into his office, and he said, "He's actually having some problems. He has to take his lithium. He has to take it regularly. You're his big brother, try to tell him. And by the way, what do you do?"
In that simple question, everything changed. Ronald said that he was a conductor. And then the floodgates let loose.
From that point, I just told him my whole life story without stopping. And as I was talking to him, I started talking faster and faster because I started to get very, very agitated. And before I knew it, I was just talking a mile a minute. And I remember I looked up after about 20 minutes, and I hadn't let him say a word. And he says to me, "May I just stop you for 1 second? I know you didn't come here to be diagnosed, but in my opinion, I think you probably have bipolar disorder."
Maybe it's so obvious by now, but this is what's so hard to get about mental illness. There's nothing obvious in the moment, not even when a doctor is telling you to your face.
I just was surprised. I thought, gee, I've always thought this is the way life is. Maybe that's the reason I've been having so much trouble.
For the first time in his life, Ronald had a name for what was going on. He had some idea that his ups and downs were not what everyone else experienced. He began to see the psychiatrist and started on lithium, a common medication for bipolar disorder. It cut the tops off the highs and the bottoms off the lows for a range that was a lot more manageable. So problem solved. Now there was nothing in the way of him becoming the next Leonard Bernstein. Ronald believed that all he needed to do was let those around him know what he had, and he would get their support. So he decided to tell his personal manager.
I thought that if I told him, that it would explain all of my inconsistency and that he would somehow help me with it. Like if I was in a situation where I was doing something outrageous, he'd make some excuse to get me out of that situation because he would know that the next week or in the next month I would be brilliant again.
This was the guy who was responsible for getting his bookings, the lifeline for Ronald's career. But when Ronald told him,
his face froze to ice, and I think I never talked to him again.
Not for lack of effort. Ronald tried everything. He even found out about a flight his manager was taking and booked the seat next to him. In Hollywood stories, this always worked.
I was the window seat, and then he came to his seat, and he didn't know what to say or do, so he changed his seat.
And that was that.
He just simply dropped me. When he found out that I had bipolar disorder, that was it. Boom.
This triggered a depression. No manager, little motivation, and a diagnosis. All of that made the prospect of conducting jobs really, really grim. He retreated to New York and began a phase that I'm going to call his wild left turn period. First, Ronald enrolled in grad school to become a psychotherapist.
I decided that the best thing to do with my life would be to help people.
But he wound up in an experimental psych lab, collecting data about rats. He hated it, so he quit. Not feeling qualified to do anything else, he started taking odd jobs, sheer survival employment. So for a few weeks, the brilliant Jewish conductor delivered Christmas trees for tips. Then he sold surgical gloves from a phone center that turned out to be a scam. He offered free weekends to sell a timeshare. Once he even worked at Carnegie Hall. The irony was galling. He should have been on the stage. Instead, he was in a bullpen of salespeople cold calling about ticket packages. But he made one concession for his reputation. He used an alias.
I didn't want to give anyone my real name because I knew that I would at some point conduct at Carnegie Hall. I'd be conducting there.
For about 2 years, Ronald scraped by until he finally reconnected with Juilliard. He got a job teaching and soon began rekindling his conducting career. He was back in his element. But he had learned something from the incident with his manager, never to be candid about his mental illness. Ronald was a naturally open person, but for the first time he felt like he had something to actively hide.
I tried not to meet anyone until after my first rehearsal.
Orchestra administrators and big donors typically wanted to rub elbows with conductors, and conductors were expected to comply. Not Ronald. He figured that once they saw his ability to conduct, his quirks would be forgiven. But if they met him before...
They think I have something weird.
There was another reason it wasn't simple for him to just be a great conductor. At times, he stopped taking lithium. Going on and off lithium. If you could put a number on how many times you did that?
10 or 15.
What's unusual about this is nothing. Absolutely nothing. About a quarter of people with a mental illness will discontinue taking medication after 10 days. And after 2 years, up to 75%. One reason many people do this is when you feel good, it's hard to see the need. And with bipolar disorder, sooner or later, you feel good.
You start to feel a little manic, and then it's pretty good. And then you can see it's a little bit better, and that's pretty good. You want me to keep taking my medication? I'm fine. I think my medication is what's holding me back. Maybe I'll stop.
So by the 1990s, life was a really complicated series of unpredictable ups and downs. But the success rate was trending down.
So every time you have an episode and then come down and come back to sea level, you kind of have to start over. You kind of have to get all new friends. Up to that point, life was random, mostly bad.
What he needed was a partner, an anchor. And just as he hit an all-time low, he was about to find her.
If I really want to be honest about it, I feel that my life started when I met Caroline Whiddon.
The crush absolutely started that day. Absolutely.
As you may have guessed, that's Caroline Whiddon. But even though Ronald would find his anchor, it would be too late.
People were kind of looking at each other like, what's going on with this guy? You know, what sort of physical ailment does he have that he's not sharing with us?
I couldn't walk in a straight line, and you had to take me to the hospital.
And by the time we got to the ER, 5 minutes later, it was clear he could not walk. He could not get out of the car.
Part 2 of Ronald's story is coming up on the next episode of Brain Stories. It'll be out January 22nd. Follow us. Brain Stories is releasing new episodes every 2 weeks into April. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you liked it, we'd like your help. Let your friends, family, or perfect strangers know about Brain Stories. There are a lot of podcasts, and the world is busy. Your recommendation is the best way to cut through the noise, to help people like you find brain stories and help all of us increase the understanding around serious mental illness. If you want to comment or share about a story you know about, we'd love that. So email us at brainstoriesproductions@gmail.com. Let us know what you think or how the story made you feel. If you'd like more information or resources about bipolar disorder, look in our show notes or visit our website at brainstoriesproductions.com. Thanks to the team that made this story possible. Our associate producer and editor is Kate Ruscosa. Original music for this episode was composed and more accurately scored with elegant precision by Paul Swartzel. Karen Given is our incredible story editor. Our audio mixer is Rob Byers. Executive produced by Frank Kosa and Janet Yang. Thanks always to our advisors and supporters. This show is a copyright of Brain Stories Productions and the Sam O'Bay Corporation. The use of this episode, or any of its content in any form or way for artificial intelligence, its development or training, is copyright infringement and expressly prohibited without prior written agreement. See you on January the 22nd.